尊敬的威廉·鲁托总统阁下，各位来宾、老师们、同学们，大家上午好。在这个春和景明的美好时节，我们相聚在庄严古朴的北京大学办公楼礼堂，共同欢迎肯尼亚共和国总统威廉·鲁托阁下到访北京大学，并发表演讲。下面，请允许我介绍来自肯尼亚共和国的嘉宾，他们是肯尼亚共和国总统威廉·鲁托阁下。总统夫人雷切尔·鲁托女士，肯尼亚共和国首席内阁部长兼外长穆萨利亚·穆达瓦迪。
And Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kenya. Accompanying President Ruto are members of the Kenyan delegation visiting China. Welcome, everyone. The Chinese guests present today include Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the Republic of Kenya, Guo Haiyan. Deputy Director General of the International Cooperation and Exchange Department of the Ministry of Education, Zhao Lei. And representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Education of China. Representatives from Peking University include Secretary of the Party Committee and Director of the University Council of Peking University, He Guangcai. President of Peking University, Gong Xihuang. Executive Deputy Secretary of the Party Committee and Executive Deputy Director of the University Council, Chen Baojian. Deputy Secretary of the Party Committee and Deputy Director of the University Council, Wu Hao. As well as faculty and student representatives from various departments of Peking University. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Fang Fang, Vice President of Peking University. First, I'd like to invite Academician Gong Xihuang, President of Peking University, to deliver a welcome address. Distinguished President William Ruto, distinguished guests and friends, teachers and students, good morning. It is a great honor for us to welcome President William Ruto of the Republic of Kenya to Peking University in this vibrant spring day at Yuanyuan. Here, on behalf of all the faculty and students of Peking University, I would like to extend a warm welcome to President Ruto and all the distinguished guests present here today. Despite the geographical distance between China and Kenya, the historical ties between our peoples date back to the ancient maritime Silk Road. Over 600 years ago, Chinese navigator Zheng He led a fleet to the coastal regions of present-day Kenya, writing a chapter of friendly exchanges between our nations. Today, the relations between our two countries is flourishing, with comprehensive strategic partnerships steadily advancing, political mutual trust continuously strengthening, and international cooperation becoming increasingly close, which has yielded fruitful results in the joint construction of the Belt and Road Initiative. President Xi Jinping has highly praised the China-Kenya relationship, stating on multiple occasions that the two countries are at the forefront of China-Africa cooperation, bringing benefits to our peoples and setting an example for China-Africa cooperation. Peking University has long valued cooperation with Kenya and other African countries. We have established an African Studies Center offering courses in African languages such as Swahili to cultivate professional talents. We have also engaged in joint archaeological excavations with the Kenya National Museum to enhance research of historical exchanges between China and Kenya. In 2016, under the personal guidance of President Xi Jinping, the Institute of South Cooperation and Development was established at Peking University, training a large number of high-end talents in governance and administration for developing countries, including Kenya. Peking University actively participates in various activities under the UNESCO Priority Africa Program, hosts an Africa-themed sub-forum at the Beijing Forum, and co-initiated projects such as the African Girls Health Education Program to deepen exchanges and cooperation with various sectors in Kenya. President Ruto has long been a champion of the education cause, actively promoting education accessibility and fairness during his tenure as Minister of Higher Education, emphasizing international education cooperation. After assuming the presidency, he proposed the bottom-up economic transformation agenda dedicated to improving people's livelihoods and national modernization. These efforts align closely with China's development philosophy. Looking into the future, we look forward to joining hands with Kenya to deepen cooperation in education, technology, cultural exchanges, and other fields to contribute wisdom and strength to the modernization of countries in the global south. In conclusion, let us once again warmly welcome President Ruto's visit to Peking University. And wish the President and his delegation a successful and Thank you, President Gong. As he just mentioned, Peking University has a long-standing friendly cooperation with the higher education sector in Kenya, and we are committed to further strengthening the friendship and comprehensive cooperation between China and Kenya. Next, please allow me to provide a brief introduction of our keynote speaker. William Ruto, the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya, has held various important positions in Kenya, including Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Higher Education, and Deputy President. President Ruto is a graduate of the University of Nairobi with a PhD in plant ecology. His government philosophy emphasizes economic transformation, agricultural modernization, and sustainable development, with a particular emphasis on improving the living standards of the Kenyan people through a bottom-up economic model. On the international stage, President Ruto has actively promoted cooperation between Kenya and various countries around the world, particularly emphasizing the strategic comprehensive partnership between Kenya and China. Under his leadership, cooperation between China and Kenya in infrastructure construction, trade, education, and cultural exchanges has continuously deepened. Now, let's warmly welcome President William Ruto to deliver his speech.
Professor He Honshu, Chair of the University Council, the President of Peking University, Professor Gong Yuhyuan, the management and faculty of the university, dear students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the people of Kenya, let me express my deep gratitude for the honor and privilege to address this iconic and top-ranked university, which is not only one of China's most historic and prestigious universities, but also a global citadel of intellectual vibrancy, academic excellence, and groundbreaking research. From its founding in 1898, as a symbol of reform to its pivotal role in shaping China's intellectual and academic identity, Peking University has consistently stood at the vanguard of rigorous scholarship and public service. I commend your leadership, faculty, and the entire community for cultivating a world-class institution that fosters mutual understanding, talent development, and knowledge sharing between China and the world. Peking University has played a pivotal role in China-Africa educational relations, having educated over 4,000 African students since 1956, including many from Kenya. We are proud of our academic collaboration, including the partnership with Kenyatta University in literature and cultural studies. These exchanges and the scholarships you provide are building lifelong people-to-people bonds and transforming lives in very tangible ways. Indeed, education is a pillar of our diplomatic partnership. As Kenya, and as we deepen our focus on science, technology, and innovation, we welcome further partnerships with Chinese institutions, particularly in STEM fields, that is, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the creative economy. Kenya's Silicon Savannah is established at Concert Technopolis, and our upcoming National Artificial Intelligence Strategy offers a unique platform for cutting-edge collaboration between Kenya and China. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather at a time of profound and accelerated global change. From regional conflicts, economic shocks, and climate disruption to cyber insecurity and demographic shifts, the challenges we face today are complex, interconnected, and urgent. But within these challenges are opportunities. Opportunities for renewed partnership, bold thinking, and reimagined global architecture. Africa and China have emerged as pivotal partners in this shifting landscape, bound by history, powered by mutual interest, and grounded in a shared future. 2 days after Kenya gained independence, in December 1963, China opened its embassy in Nairobi, becoming the 4th country to do so. Our ties have only deepened since, culminating in the establishment of a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership in 2017. China is now sub-Saharan Africa's largest trading partner and Kenya's largest overall. We export tea, coffee, flowers, and more. And I trust many of you may have enjoyed a cup of Kenyan tea or coffee, or a bouquet of fresh flowers or roses from Kenya. Over 3,000 Chinese companies operate in Africa, 500 of them in Kenya, most from the private sector. Our cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative has delivered flagship infrastructure projects including roads, ports, and the standard gauge railway infrastructure that is reshaping national connectivity and regional integration. But even as we celebrate these achievements, we must confront a sobering truth. The post-war multilateral system is broken, dysfunctional, and no longer fit for purpose. And the escalating trade tariff war may be its final death blow. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to give my perspectives on 4 key aspects, namely peace and security, the climate change crisis, the global financial architecture, and matters global trade, and suggest possible ideas on the way forward. On the United Nations and the UN Security Council, no other circumstance other than the post-war situation would have made the current structure of the UN, and more particularly, the UN Security Council, and that is the 5 permanent members with individual powers, an acceptable peace and security architecture. The Security Council, once a beacon of peace and diplomacy, now has 1 permanent member invading one country, while another member takes sides in conflict, in direct contradiction to the Council's own resolutions. Yet today, the permanent members live in denial and resist reform, even as the Security Council becomes less and less legitimate and its relevance is being put to question. On the other hand, the global multilateral financial architecture is simply outdated. The Bretton Woods institutions recently celebrated their 80th anniversary. 80 years ago, we all know 2/3 of the world's nations did not exist as states when this architecture came into being. The IMF was established to buttress the gold standard, fixed exchange rate system, a system that collapsed 50 years ago. The World Bank, on the other hand, was established to rebuild Europe, an assignment now very well overtaken by events. This financial architecture that we have today presents 4 intertwined challenges. Number 1, the challenge of liquidity or financial safety net for the multiple and persistent climate and economic shocks that we face today. Secondly, inadequate finance for development and climate action. And number 3, cost of capital, what we are calling the great financial divide. And lastly, the problem of recurring debt crisis in developing countries, which is a consequence of the first 3. The climate crisis is perhaps the most urgent and existential challenge of our time. Africa, despite contributing the least to global emissions, bear the greatest burden through floods, droughts, displacement, and food insecurity. We have scientific consensus that these extreme weather events are human-induced. But even if it were otherwise, decarbonization of the economy is progress in its own right. Conservation of nature and clean air are desirable ends in and of themselves. But 30 COP conferences later, national interests continue to stand in the way of global collective action, notwithstanding the fact that the atmosphere has no national boundaries. We continue, in my opinion, to play dice with nature. When the World Trade Organization was mooted in 1945, world trade consisted primarily of goods. The wealthy industrial countries exported manufactured goods, while the less developed countries exported primary products and raw materials. But today, the world of trade has changed dramatically. Trade in services now accounts for 1/4 of global trade and are growing 3 times faster than the merchandise trade. The business process outsourcing, BPO commonly known as, and IT-enabled services, which were inconceivable in 1945, are currently in the order of US $300 billion and projected to grow at 10% annually over the next decade. trading services, particularly digitally enabled services, defies the traditional goods logic, as it enables professionals in developing countries to compete with their counterparts in industrialized countries with a lot of ease. But this leveling of the playing field goes beyond digital services. For example, affordable air travel enabled medical tourism to emerge as a growth industry. Ladies and gentlemen, having contextualized the situation as it is now, allow me at this point to suggest my views on where I consider the opportunities of the future to be. Let me put some context to this. For the first 45 years of its existence, the post-war multilateral system was shaped by bipolar ideological divide of the Cold War. This divide, the East-West divide, suggests that we are unable to overcome the bipolar of that era, or the bipartisanship or bipolarism of that era. Seemingly, there appears to be Cold War warriors that are unable to see a world that is not ideologically polarized and are determined to reinvent a polarized world by every means possible. In a world where globalization is no longer an option, but an existential imperative, any polarization is undesirable, unnecessary, and untenable. Two structural forces, in my opinion, have driven globalization, namely technology and demography. They are irreversible. Until very recently, perhaps no more than a decade ago, it was taken for granted that the industrialized West would maintain a competitive advantage in high technology industries, while the global South would remain in low-tech, labor-intensive, and primary goods industries. Today, disruptive, cutting-edge innovation can pop up anywhere in the world. The DeepSeek AI disruption and Kenya's revolutionary mobile money transfer technology are glaring signs of our times. Additionally, there is a saying that demography is destiny. Economic development cannot be divorced from demographics. It is people who produce, and it is people who consume or provide a market. At the dawn of African independence in 1960, the combined population of the US and the European Union at 520 million was double that of Africa at 260 million. 6 decades on, it is the opposite or the reverse. Africa's population of 1.5 billion is now double the combined US-EU population of 800 million. The demographic dynamic has an inevitability about it. Aging societies would want to reverse the trend, but there is very little they can do about it. So, inevitably, capital will have to flow to where the workforce is. At 19, Africa's median age is less than half of Europe and comparable to China's median age in the mid-70s. By 2050, Africa will account for a quarter of the world's workforce, the same proportion for China today. Let me tell you this. If the first half of this century belongs to China, the second half of this century belongs to Africa. We must therefore imagine a new peace and security architecture, one rooted in democracy, equity, transparency, and equal representation. It is my view that the security architecture of the world should be representative of the 5 continental blocks, that is the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Africa and Middle East, with equal representation for each of the regions. Seeing as Europe already has 3 members, France, the UK, and Russia, it seems reasonable to all of us that the membership for each region be set at 3, so that we end up with a total of 12 permanent members. Such a council would better reflect today's geopolitical realities and uphold the principle of sovereign equality among nations. On the other hand, global opinion is divided on whether the current international financial architecture can be reformed. Many people tell me it cannot. My view is that as difficult as it is still easier to reform this financial architecture, even though the latter would be a better option. At the heart of the Bretton Woods institution is a fundamental issue. These are shareholder institutions. At the time they were formed, the shareholders were also the primary stakeholders and beneficiaries. Both the World Bank and IMF have evolved into development finance institutions, but the ownership and power remains with the wealthy countries that they no longer serve. The interests of the shareholders and stakeholders and beneficiaries are at great variance almost all the time. This anomaly became apparently glaring during the IMF SDR issuance, where 64% of allocations ended up in wealthy countries that did not need liquidity support. The poorest countries, which needed it most, received only 2.4%. That is the extent of disconnect between the shareholders' interests and the stakeholders and beneficiaries' interests. There are many reforms required of these institutions, but I believe that the most consequential is governance changes that will transform them into independent, apolitical, global institutions, insulated from the national interest of their shareholders. And you know what? This requires no more than adopting modern corporate governance best practice. The shareholders should elect directors, and the directors should appoint and supervise competent professional management. Just as simple as that. I believe reform, not abandonment of multilateral system, is the path into the future. Let me go back to climate change. The inaugural Africa Climate Summit held in Nairobi in September 2023 resolved, and I quote, to urge world leaders to rally behind the proposal for a global carbon taxation regime, including a carbon tax on fossil fuel trade, maritime transport, and aviation, end of quote. This principle is accepted at the national level and is implemented through carbon taxes, subsidies to green energy, and national emissions trading systems. Yet, we continue to resist taking this to its logical conclusion, that is, having a global carbon taxation regime. However, I take note that recently, in fact earlier last month, the International Maritime Organization adopted a global emissions tax, meaning that this reality is beginning to dawn, that is the way to the future. Kenya, on the other hand, generates 90% of its electricity from renewables and has enshrined climate adaptation in law. Nairobi is now home to the second headquarters of the Global Center on Adaptation, the first global institution co-located in both the Global North and Global South. I wish to commend China for its leadership in renewable energy technologies, particularly in solar power and electric vehicles. Without China, many of these technologies would remain unaffordable for much of the developing world. Today, solar panels, e-bikes, and electric buses are commonplace in African towns. This is what meaningful South-to-South cooperation should look like. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world's trade system evolves, we must update our assumptions. While the language of international trade is framed on issues of trade between countries, much of trade now occurs within international supply chains of global cooperations. Actual trade flows are captured in export and import data, provide a very limited, maybe even distorted view of international trade. Let me share one perspective. Apple Corporation reported US dollars 391 billion sales in 2024, of which America's contribution of US dollars 167 billion, while the rest of the world contributed 224 billion of that 391 billion. In effect, more than 2/3 of its market is outside the United States. Nike, another example, reported sales of 49 billion US dollars, 21 billion in North America, and 28 billion from the rest of the world. By and large, America's global corporations generate between half and 2/3 of their business abroad. The question we have to ask is, how is this value distributed? When Levi's or Calvin Klein jeans are stitched in Kenya or Cambodia, then sold in China or India, with the profits accruing to the Global North Corporation, which share of the value is global trade and which is not? It's a question I hope some of the students in this university will explore. It stands to reason that when the entire value chain is factored into the trade equation, North America enjoys an even more significant commercial surplus from the global trade than is reflected in the trade figures we are currently working with. Indeed, this is the conclusion reached in a study by the European think tank Center for Economic Policy Research, published in 2024, which was titled globalization, and profitability of US firms. Let me quote them, and I quote, "Lower trade barriers allowed North American firms to enter new markets and utilize their intangible assets to boost profitability. Foreign profitability of US firms increased by much more than domestic profitability." End of quote. It is an assignment to all of us as we discuss matters trade to know that the statistics that are available do not give a full picture of what values and what trade we are working with. There is a big difference between numbers of trading goods that is not complemented with numbers trade in services and other intangibles. Kenya's response to these realities is rooted in economic diversification and regional integration. Through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we aim to unlock value chains and markets across our 1.4 billion strong continent. Nairobi, our capital, serves as a UN headquarters in the Global South and as a hub for environment, finance, media, and innovation. We are also a diplomatic hub. Kenya has remained a non-aligned nation committed to peaceful resolution of conflict and sovereignty and mutual respect. We support the One China policy, a two-state solution in the Middle East, and dialogue, not escalation, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As we say in Africa, when two bulls fight, the grass suffers. Let us choose understanding over confrontation. Kenya's greatest asset is its people, young, skilled, and entrepreneurial. Over 80% of our population is under 35, and we are building institutions and ecosystems that will harness this demographic advantage through education reform, digital innovation, and youth entrepreneurship. Initiatives like our Silicon Savannah at Concert Technopolis and our Big Five University Research Cluster are also attracting global partnership. Peking University can play a pivotal role in this future. We encourage deeper cooperation through scholarships, artificial intelligence research, innovation labs, and student exchanges. We envision a digital future that is Kenya in location, Africa in identity, and global in impact. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya and China are not merely trade partners. We are co-architects of a new world order, one that is fair, inclusive, and sustainable. Let us measure our success not in GDP growth or trade volumes, but in how many lives we uplift, how many futures we secure, and how much dignity we restore. This visit, as the first African state visit to China this year, mirrors my 2024 visit to the United States, the first African state visit there in 15 years. Perhaps, symbolically, Kenya can serve as a bridge between East and West, North and South, in an era of deepening geopolitical tensions. Let this be our shared legacy that China and Africa, through trust, vision, and partnership, help to build the foundation for a 21st century multilateralism that serves all humanity. I thank you.
感谢总统阁下的精彩演讲。您的远见卓识给我们留下了深刻的印象。您关于非洲可持续发展道路的分享，以及对当前国际形势下非洲国家国际合作前景的展望，为我们提供了极具启发性的新视角。和总统阁下进行互动交流，请同学们举手提问。在提问前，先做一下自我介绍。好，我们先请右边中间的这位同学。
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Johnny Yang. I'm a PhD student at National School of Development. Thank you for your enlightening speech. I have learned a lot. And, climate change is now becoming a major challenge for all countries, including China and most countries in Africa. And so I wonder what is your plan to fight against climate risk, and especially extreme weather, and how would you like to deepen your cooperation on climate with China in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you say correctly, climate change has no boundaries. The effects of climate change affect all countries, maybe not in the same way, not as the bigger burden is shared by countries in the global south, maybe to a great extent in Africa. And we should step up what I said in my statement. The current international financial architecture do not have the requisite resources to finance development and climate action. And that is why it is our belief that there is need for reform of the international financial architecture to be in tandem and to synchronize the international financial architecture with the realities of today, that we have serious shocks that come as a result of climate change, droughts, floods that result in serious devastation in many parts of the world, and there is no adequate resources to be able to mitigate the effects of serious climate effects on countries, especially those in the global south. And therefore, it is our push, and we're very happy that we're making progress to the realization that there is need to have a financial architecture that is sensitive and responsive to the realities of the moment. It is our considered view that beyond the reform of the financial architecture is new sources of funding, new sources of raising resources to finance development and to finance climate action. And that is why we are saying there is need for us to look at carbon taxation. And finally, is to engage in adaptation, making sure that we mitigate the effects of climate change. It is the reason why we're working with China and other partners in climate action, and the contribution of China in the fields that I have said, in generation that is generation of energy, that is clean energy using solar panels, the reduction of use of carbon footprint using e-vehicles is a significant contribution towards managing the effects of climate change, and therefore the partnership between Africa and Kenya, for that matter, and China is significant in both mitigating the effects of climate change, raising the necessary resources, and making sure that we engage in adaptation all the way to managing the environment.
Thank you very much.
谢谢总统阁下。由于时间关系呢，我们提最后一个问题，我们把这个机会留给我们的留学生代表 请中间靠左的那位同学。
Thank you. I'm Lichuma Clinton from Kenya. I'm a beneficiary of China-Kenya bilateral ties. I have a scholarship through the UDA party and the CPP party. I got a scholarship from MOFCOM, and I'm doing masters in public policy ending in July. My question is, what are African leaders doing in terms of reverting, because we are more dependent on resource-dependent economies rather than knowledge-based economies? And how are African leaders going to negotiate with international partners for better, equitable, and mutual benefits for both parties? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're right, and I spoke in my statement, if you followed my statement, the knowledge economy, the economy, the future of trade is not necessarily going to be trade in goods or products. The future is going to be trade in services. That is where growth is significant. And trade in services means that we invest in people, we invest in education, we invest in training. It is the reason why Kenya spends 30% of our national budget in education and training. We spend $5 billion every year in education because the future is in people and trading services. It is also the reason why, working with friends from all continents, we are expanding our footprint on fiber optic to be able to do more on digital jobs, digital commerce, because that's where the future lies. And so even as we look into the future, we are making ourselves competitive by investing in the areas that have growth going into the future. That's number one. Number two, we are also reforming our institutions. For example, the African Union is being reformed so that we can better negotiate, we can improve our tools of negotiation with other parts of the world, so that even if it is trading goods or even trading services, we can negotiate better if we build the muscle to act together. It is also the reason why there is the South-to-South cooperation that brings into the equation the relationship between Africa and China and Asia and others, so that we can better negotiate ourselves into business, into opportunities, into the future, and also insulate ourselves from unilateral action from others who may want to take advantage of the muscle that they have. So this whole building of coalitions that would help improve our position of trade, of investment, are the two sides of what we are doing. We are investing in our people so that we create advantages for the future, especially in the areas of trade, in services and other spaces. And especially as we look into the future, Africa is going to have a quarter of the world's workforce by 2050. That gives us advantage. And we need to make sure that we sharpen that workforce, we make it fit for purpose, so that we can take full advantage of that workforce the way China has taken in half of this century. We intend to prepare ourselves to take over the advantage in the next half of this century. Thank you very much.
再次感谢总统阁下对同学们提出问题所做出的富有洞见的解答。您的分享不仅拓宽了我们的国际视野，而且加深了我们对肯尼亚发展现状和前景的理解。 我们相信今天的交流将成为北京大学与肯尼亚进一步深化合作的重要契机。我们期待未来有更多的机会与肯尼亚各界加强交流，为深化中国同肯尼亚关系、构建新时代全天候中非命运共同体做出贡献。接下来，我们有请何光彩书记代表北京大学向总统阁下赠送纪念品——北京大学大学堂牌匾。我们也请何书记、龚校长与总统阁下合影。尊敬的各位来宾、老师们、同学们。